G'day Bomber fans, we had the bye, so not much footy to talk about, but I still haven't updated you on our VFL team and their recent footy. So today I'm going to go over each AFL listed player that has played in the reserves and tell you how they went in their game. Quick update, we only played the one match in this period. We played the Carlton Blues reserves before a bye. The game against Carlton was a thriller. We kicked the first two, then they piled on 7 in a row to get out to a massive quarter-time lead. From there we found our way back into the contest, ultimately taking the lead and winning a thriller by 3 points, 104 to 101. Tex Wanganeen kicked the sealer from 50 metres out. It was a really entertaining game. It was a much needed win for the club. We went clear of the bottom of the ladder, so let's get into it. Here is the VFL recap for rounds 11 and 12. I was calling out for a Shiel statement game in the VFL to get back into that senior team, and it got off to a good start. He kicked a quick goal and had a good moment not long after that suggested he was going to have that pick-me game, but unfortunately for Shiel, he was just not able to get around the pill in open play. I don't know if he was being tagged or not, but he was only really impacting on the inside. He had 10 clearances, which is great. I thought his contested work was really strong as it should be, but I would have loved to see him really impact the game in open play, get around the footy in both areas. I've said a few times, Shiel is kind of just going about it, playing his role in the midfield in the reserves. This is a high-profile, highly played player. He shouldn't be a role player in the reserves. He should be absolutely tearing games apart and demanding his spot back in the AFL team. I reckon Shiel has only been best on ground once or twice this year in the Rezzies. He is often in the votes. He's second or third or fourth best, but he's never putting together those pick-me games consistently, the ones that you saw McRae or Luke Parker put together when they were demoted to the Rezzies. It was a good game, but we need more. Sam Weideman, I'm really impressed with what I'm seeing from Weeds. I know it's pretty popular to dislike him and the signing, and it obviously hasn't worked for us that well, but while we have him on the list, I think we got to look at the positives, and right now he's playing very good footy in the reserves. He is now our main key defensive backup option, ahead of Hayes and Reid, who is now injured. I wouldn't be mad to see him play senior footy if an injury hits our backline, because he has genuinely been really solid in defence since moving there. The game against Carlton was a really tough one for our defenders. It was fast moving, it was high scoring. He was often caught out of position like others on the field were, but he was intercepting everything. Game high 12 interceptions and a few other spoils as well, I should say. He was really influential in defence. He's just reliable, he's mature, and it's funny because he's been a forward for so long, years and years. He's always struggled, but now he looks so natural as a backman. It's a bit frustrating that the move wasn't made earlier in his career, because now it's looking like it's a bit too late for him. He's playing really good footy but can't get into the senior side. I hope he does at some stage, so he at least gives other clubs something to think about if he is delisted, because I'm really liking what I'm seeing from him in the VFL. It makes me feel good about a potential injury to another defender if there was to be one. He gives us depth. Lewis Hayes, he yet again had it tough. The last 3 or 4 weeks he's had the ball flying down his way a lot, so he definitely had a low lights reel just because of the sheer amount of entries. Percentage says if you kick the ball someone's way enough times, they're eventually going to look silly with one of those moments. I think this was probably his worst game in terms of containing his opponent and nullifying their impact, but it was one of those days. It's easy to point fingers at individual defenders when a score is so high, but it was a team-wide issue for both teams. It was a very stressful day for defensive line coaches. Bryan, he yet again was a monster in the ruck. He completely destroyed Alec Murkov, who is listed for the Blues. He was all over him, 39 hitouts to his 25, but it was his around the ground work, 22 disposals to 8 clearances, 6 score involvements. Bryan was just a lot better than his opponent. He had a real impact on the game. Our midfield was really good against the Blues, and Bryan was a huge reason for that. He had some great hitouts to the favour of Shiel or O'Neill or Haitley. I think this time, his time in the AFL was probably good for him, because we saw him look a little bit more rushed in the higher level, not as familiar with the pacing of the game, so it would have been good to get another confidence booster here before he is to come back into the AFL again if he does, and it helps when you play AFL listed players as well. Caddy is really starting to get going. He has kicked multiple goals in his last 3 matches, but the game against Carlton was his best so far, I reckon. He was a really strong marking target. He took 3 or 4 big clunks during the game, a few of which led to goals. It was super promising because he was having to battle against guys like Caleb Marchbank and Lewis Young, who are AFL listed, and he genuinely had a huge impact on the game. 3 goals, 2 behinds. It wasn't a big bag, but he looked really dangerous around the sticks. I think we are about to see a little battle for spots between him and Jones now. I really do. Jones isn't as cemented in that 22 as he was earlier in the year, and Caddy is playing some really good footy in the reserves. He's starting to look like that top 10 pick. I'm really keen to see how he goes in the next month, whether it's in the AFL or VFL. Either way, I'm really excited to see what he does. Davey Jnr came back for his first VFL game in a while. He was pretty lively. He was quite hard at it, pushed a bit higher up the field than he does in the AFL. He plays midfield a lot more at this level, which is fair. That's where he played as a kid, and it shows what he could be like when he matures a bit in his body at the higher level. There are glimpses of a decent midfielder forward. It's just hard to see because he's so skinny still, but I thought his tackling was pretty good at times against Carlton, and he did well to get a bit of the ball, kicked a goal as well. Davey was good. He wasn't great, not bad. It was just a pretty good game. Not a disappointing response from being dropped, but he won't be added back into the team because of it. Luamon Lual had it tough, as most of our defenders did. He was often caught having to run back and forth because he likes to progress higher up the field, so I feel like he was covering a lot of ground. He's very fit though, it didn't faze him too much. I thought he was alright. 19 disposals, most would have been uncontested. He had some iffy moments and that does happen a lot with Lual. He doesn't always do the best thing with ball in hand, but I feel like he's at least learning on the trot, becoming more solid in defence, and I think there were some mistakes early that many would drop their heads from, but he managed to find his way back into the game a bit, which is really good from a first-year player. Pretty good game. Jayden Davey is becoming a very hard player to read. Last week he had his worst game for the club. He was genuinely very poor. I was thinking maybe he doesn't have a place on the list after watching, and I know a few of you were thinking the same, but he responded with a pretty impressive game against the Blues. He was dangerous in front of goals, really creative, hot with pressure. He kicked 2 goals. He wasn't extraordinary, but at least he wasn't poor again, because he hasn't been in good form before this last match. He had a fantastic 3-goal game in round 7 that got everybody up and about, but then he followed it up with 3 goalless matches and averaged a little over 7 touches in those games. So he didn't need to star, he just needed to be back amongst the action, which he was. Hopefully from here he builds and we see less of those passenger games. He's in a contract year after all. Archie Roberts, his stats look like he had a genuine mare, but he was rested for most of the game because he was the carryover emergency for the AFL side. He played a bit to start and then came off in case there was an injury with the seniors, so it's really hard to judge his game. He only had a few touches, he wasn't really going at 100%, I would say. They would have told him to not go too crazy into the contest just to be safe. I reckon he'll get a full game in the VFL next match because we have some players returning from injury for the AFL team. Vigo Visentini probably had his worst game, or he probably definitely had his worst game against the Blues. He just couldn't get involved. Bryan was back in the ruck, so he was up forward, but Caddy was usually the target, and if not him, it was a VFL listed forward. So Visentini just couldn't find a way to make a difference in a new role. It's a good learning curve and a good experience though, having a completely shutout game where you barely touch the ball. He just needs to find a way to make a difference somehow, even when playing badly, inject that physicality. Would have been great to see that more last Sunday. He definitely needs to lift next match. Tex Wanganeen was given a bit of a role shift lately, which I think was required. He was kind of floating a bit as that high half forward, so his magnet was moved down the other end of the field, playing as a halfback flanker. I feel like there's more potential there. I've always said that Wanganeen with ball in hand does good things, or at least makes things happen. He's very creative, and that isn't ideal if you're starved of opportunities up forward, so he was moved to the back line where he has to find the ball while defending, and there were plenty of things I liked about his game. The stats aren't amazing, but I feel like he provided the team with some opportunities through his creativity, and that was kind of summed up by his late goal where he roamed up high up the field to make the most of their flat-footed defense. He had genuine defensive brains at times, which was interesting as well. I wasn't expecting to see that. It wasn't an excellent game, it wasn't even that good of a game, but there were some good highlights that he can build confidence from. And finally, the star of the show, Saad El-Hawli. Mixed news here. We start with the positives. He was incredible, he was game-changing, and is genuinely ready for AFL footy. He has torn the game apart 2 weeks in a row, but this game was just something else. 4 goals, over 25 touches, some high-flying pack marks. He was our best on ground. He probably would be in line for a debut against the Eagles, but he unfortunately, late in the game, did his ankle. He is set to be out for most of the season now. He went up for a high mark, landed awkwardly on it, and it's meant he's had to go under the knife. Injury after just 2 VFL games. A cruel irony considering that is what happened to Jayden Hunter, who El-Hawli came into the list because of. So good news and bad news with our new recruit. Hopefully we see more of him at the end of the year. But that is that. Those are the AFL listed players who starred and didn't star for us against the Blues. Really interesting game. Fun one to watch. Fun one for certain individuals. They had the bye to rest, and now for some reason we travel up to the Gold Coast before our game against the Eagles in the AFL. It makes no sense why we didn't do that when the AFL team played Gold Coast. It just ruins our reserves team for a week to leave players out for no reason. The week after we play Collingwood's VFL team, which should be fun. Until then though, like, subscribe, and go Bombers.